Hi, and welcome to Let Into Gold, featuring music industry professionals who are making an impact in both local and international creative industries. Guests from a variety of backgrounds join the Alchemical Records team of contributors to discuss industry news and introduce audiences to a day in the life of their world. The web series provides a means for indie artists to learn about the many areas that make up the creative scene, as well as a platform for guests to promote their causes. And with that, I am going to hand it over to our contributing writer, Charlie Maybe, to introduce our guest.
Hi, everybody. Today's guest is Massimo Zaru, and I'm very excited to have Massimo on the program today, a dear friend of mine for quite a long time. Massimo is an audio recording and mixing engineer specializing in on site and remote live recording. He has spent years in the DC and Northern Virginia music community, getting his start studying at George Mason University and recording audition videos and recitals with music performance students. He has also worked recording with both jazz and rock bands during performances at venues, including Twin Jazz and Epicure Cafe. And Massimo provides audio recording and basic video recording alongside the ability to provide professional videographers on special requests. And then, of course, he also plays in a variety of musical projects, one of which for a long time was my band, The Aftershakes. I know that he also currently plays with the band Faded Home. And I believe you also have a theater gig, which maybe we'll get into a little later in the show. But thanks, Massimo, for joining us. Super great to have you. Our first segment is always just an opportunity to get to know you a little bit. So we want to sort of get people an idea of what you do in the community. So my first question is, what initially drew you to the world of audio engineering? And is it something that you've always done or something that you found yourself drawn to a little bit later in your life so far?
I love that. The answer is that was an accident. Because I want you to flashback, right? So I'm 25, right? And in the when I was growing up, my parents were all big on the, coming in Fairfax County, like the big holistic. Oh yeah, you're gonna do instruments. You're gonna play an orchestra. I played violin for up until high school, right? Because it helps you learn better and this and that. But music was a thing I did, right? It wasn't something I really listened to a whole bunch. And then when I was about 12 or so, anyways, my cousin showed me Skrillex, and that ruined everything, right? um so when that happened, basically, I just thought it was the coolest thing. I'd never heard anything like it, and I, like many children at that time, I was like, I want to be Skrillex, right? So I saved up different holiday, birthday money, this and that, and I was in middle school, and I got myself a copy of Ableton. And I made probably some of the worst things you could ever imagine hearing. I know there was
Like you
also,
do.
yeah. Well, there was also a dude at that time named Flux Pavilion, who he had this big style of back then, these big synths that would kind of hit you all at once, and it was all this layering. And I was like, I'll do that. And it was just 6 or 7 different chord tracks hitting you at once, no sound design. It sounded awful. And I don't know where it is. It must still be on an old laptop or something, but I listened back to it maybe 5 or 6 years ago, right? Which is 5 or 6 years after that. And I was like, wow, this is bad. Um, but I was really engaged in that idea of electronic music initially, right? And sound design and creating that, being it's not like a band where it's the instruments have their sound and then you're writing the music, this and that. I was like, you don't have instruments. You have to make the music, and then you have to make your instruments, and they can sound really cool, like weird monster growls or this and that, or really pretty bird chirps or something, right? And that just, that just took my heart into it. And I spent way too long listening to EDM and dubstep at that time. Um, and then I did eventually start branching out. I got into high school, and I was privileged enough that my school had a guitar program, and the teacher, Keith Owens, specialized himself with a jazz guitar ensemble. And that's where I started learning bass. My sister had played with him for a bit, and then she was moving away from bass, but he joked with her, hey, you're going to turn your brother into a bass player, right? And she was like, yeah, sure. And that's when I quit orchestra, and then spent 1 year in a Guitar One class, took everything about that and bass from a book I had at home, just adapted it, right? And then I went in and auditioned, and everything went swimmingly. And that's where I met a lot of other friends who would play all of these more like rock genres and everything. And we hit a point where we wanted to maybe gig around. So then we all, tried scouring whatever mics and such we had and tried recording little demos of ourselves, just high schoolers trying to play jazz standards. Some of them were still in Ableton. We had another friend who used Cubase and he recorded some stuff in that. But that was really where it was more getting my feet into the, all right, and here's how we record instruments and maybe mix them a little together and try to make things sound good. And then I got in college, and then I was, we don't have to get into this tangent yet, but I was a math major for about a year and a half in my first year. And I went through all of the math classes you can imagine, all through calc, all through linear algebra, all through like proofs classes, which the proofs class was my favorite one. And then I got into the specialized part because I was doing a statistics major, and I was like, you know what? I hate this. So like any normal 18-year-old would do, I decided to audition for the School of Music. And yeah, I'd been working in the music office as actually like one of their student receptionists for that whole year. And it went well, and I got in. And it was just a very like, I felt really happy, and then got myself in the throes of it. I knew I didn't really want to do like a performance major, but I did really want to do an audio engineering track. And it was just very exciting for me to finally get into these classes, start learning all this stuff in the college level, essentially. And a lot of the big things I really enjoyed were surprisingly not even just from the sound engineering courses, but even things like ear training, right? Music theory, all that. And I had done theory in high school, but especially the ear training, where it's like, oh, we'll play a chord and you have to know if it's major or minor. And if we give you a starting note before, you have to know exactly what notes that is. And I thought that sounded made up. I thought that was like some superpower or something. And I spent like 2 hours a day practicing it, because once it clicked, it was just super fun. And yeah, all of that just basically snowballed, and it's still snowballing even now after college, just enjoying everything about music. And, finally hitting a point, unlike when I was a kid, and it's like, oh, this is a thing I do, whatever, this and that, to just really have a passion in it now, to really, really just be grateful for what I can do, where I am, and, how to do it.
Cool. So actually, funny, this question is about the bass. So so aside from your work as an audio engineer, you obviously have a history of the bass. So what drew you to the bass, and how has playing the bass impacted your work in your other musical endeavors? And do you have any influences?
Oh yeah. So, like I said, I was not the first bassist in my family. I am the second bassist. My sister had been playing upright and electric since like elementary school, and with different kind of difficulties, that kind of faded off for her nearing the end of high school. But everything I do comes from her, and comes from the fact that she was the one who had these electric basses around that I could then learn from, right? She was the one that joked with that teacher, oh yeah, haha, he's gonna be your like replacement bassist. Because I mean, I already didn't like the orchestra program at my high school. I wasn't really invested in it anymore. Like I said, it was just a thing I kind of did. So I mean, if they hadn't had that conversation, I don't know, maybe I would have gone into like the engineering class or something, right? Like just some other different elective. Maybe I would have done sports, but I was classically bad at them. So probably not, right? But like all of these things kind of led into that. And a lot of it is still, I think of her as like the bass player of the family, right? Like she's the one who got me involved in all of this, and how it just kind of has snowballed and continued, right? And then definitely in terms of like styles and playing, right? Like I said, the high school focused on jazz guitar ensemble, which is a very cool setup. It's if no one's familiar, it's essentially 5 guitar players doing full arrangements where you have like a rhythm guitar, lead, harmonies, right? All this stuff. And then you also have it backed with the rhythm section of drums, bass, keyboard, right? And it's a really cool setup. I'm really grateful that we had that opportunity in high school, because I haven't seen a lot of ensembles like that other than at colleges and universities, where they have a very specialized guitar program leading students into that, right? So I was just so thankful for that. I made some of my best friends who I'm still friends with, and we all went to music school in different places, and they're all like out there playing guitar, having their fun, doing their things. Right, and we all still will hang out when we're around and keep in touch, except for the one who moved to Richmond and has a house there. Now that's kind of far from like the DC area. Oops. Um, but just that idea of playing jazz in high school led into college, obviously, where there are the different kind of um collegialized like genres, right? Like unless you're going to a specialized maybe pop school, like if you're going to Berkeley, right, you're not really going to get the opportunity to work on like pop music or hip hop or R&B unless they have a specific program for that. Most schools, right, have you down a classical or a jazz performance track. And I went in, and as a tech major, they're more interested in your engineering and you learning how to record things, maybe a bit of synthesis. So you don't have a lot of lessons and ensemble credits really built into your degree. And I thought, like, well, wait a minute, that's lame. So I'm just going to do way more credits than I need to and just keep playing in ensembles and keep doing lessons. And of course, it was with jazz because, like, yeah, why not? And that was my first real big push into learning upright bass as well, right? I even did a couple years working with the director of the program, Dr. Darden Purcell. She has an incredible jazz voice ensemble, and I was like, if there's anyone who's going to whip me into shape here, like I've got to do lessons with her, right? I've got to work on some singing, because I'd done it too in like I was in like church choir since middle school. That was another one. Weird tangent to throw in, right? But yeah, I was like, I'm a bit familiar with singing, and I'd done the ear training and I could like sight read things, but I really wanted to keep it jazz. And she had one of the best ensembles. We were invited artists at the Jazz Education Network conference in Dallas, I think maybe, oh gosh, 2018 or 2019. I'm not quite sure on dates. I'm really bad with those, but it was just an incredible opportunity, such a wonderful ensemble. And I'm just, all the jazz professors over at Mason were completely fantastic. And it was like, of course I'm going to keep taking lessons. Of course I'm going to keep playing bass. And of course I'm going to do these ensembles, because it was just, what made it fun, even if the degree didn't say I had to, right? I was like, I'll choose this. We'll have a good time. Yeah, so it was just fantastic. And then here we are now, where I play in like 4 rock bands now. Especially I finished at school, and then the throes of COVID hit in that 2020 era. There wasn't a whole lot of anything musically going around. But I had one band, which are like, they're my ride or dies. It's Abby, Rashid, and the Sundry Collective. We all met in freshman year of college because she had won this competition, which was actually hosted by a club affiliated with the major I then went into, where it was like, hey, send in your songs, this and that. Like a bunch of people could send in demos or things they've worked on, and whoever wins gets the tech students helping them on recording a full album. And one of the students involved, a great friend, Caroline Weinrath of Cinema Hearts, who I now also play with, she knew that I had been playing some upright bass. So she connected Abby and I, and then that was it. We made an album. It was a very, very folk sound early on. And then one year for like a birthday or something, she got this really nice hollow body Gretsch electric. And then we all switched to electric, full drum kit, full everything. We all got pedals for weird noises and stuff. So now it's like very much so this really cool amalgamation of like still little folk, but definitely like indie rock forward. And with people being more comfortable being vaccinated now and having boosters and such, a lot of events are coming back in. So I got called on. I, had a new band with new friends who had also done tech at Mesa and Faded Home. A great friend of mine I met at different jam nights named Nick Deshay, writes incredible solo music and like works with his producer, and it sounds fantastic. So we're in a live band with that as well. And it's just so much more playing. Like I don't regret doing audio engineering in school, obviously, but I always did have that little thought in my mind of like, oh, I don't need to like practice as much, right? Like I was never like huge on like, let me transcribe everything. Let me make sure I'm learning all this like jazz technique and the soloing, because, I wasn't a performance major. Like I was like, yeah, like playing bass isn't going to be what puts food on the table. And I was so wrong. And now I'll get calls for different like jam gigs or like pop gigs or R&B gigs, just different fill-ins. I got into a lot of musical theater gigs. I had spent some summers doing that volunteer with one of my high school friends as well. And then we moved away from that for a couple that were paying. And then obviously COVID hit, things were shut down. But two of my good friends are also music directors in the like DC and Virginia area. So now I'll just get calls from them being like, hey, we have a show happening. You want to play bass? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And in fact, coming up, I'm going to be playing bass in the production of On Your Feet over at the Gala Hispanic Theater in DC, which is just an incredible show. It's all Latin music. It's just a great time. And it really harkens back to freshman year or sophomore year, I guess, first year in music school, when my bass professor looked at me and was like, so do you know your Latin rhythms? And I was like, I don't know. And he said, all right, play a bossa nova. And I was like, okay, bun, da, dun, ba, dun, da, da, or whatever. Right. And he was like, okay, now play a samba. And I was like, bun dun dun dun, and he was like, all right, yeah, so you don't know your Latin rhythms, so you're gonna go get this book. Right? And it was all like Latin rhythms, and he was like, and we're gonna work on this for basically a year, and you're gonna learn how to play the different Latin styles. And now here we are, and I'm like, yes, thank you. Because I think what was the way he put it, because I was like, oh, I've heard like some Chick Corea stuff though, and this and that, and he was like, yeah, that's kind of like white guy playing like Latin rhythms. Like you got to learn the real rhythm. So yeah, all of these past experiences have just culminated in where I am now. And I'm just so thankful for them. Like, it's just great.
Massimo, I wanted to ask you just about the DMV scene. I know that you grew up here. So I just wanted to know from you kind of what do you think is special about it? And do you see yourself staying here kind of as you continue to grow as an artist?
Oh, yes. Growing up here, I wasn't as involved, obviously. It's stuck in that high school sphere. And then in college, obviously, it was, friends with the other jazz players. They were doing some jazz gigs around, and, you learn like some big shot names of like DC players. What really kind of got into it, after school, in my later years, I had the privilege. I worked over at the now closed down Epicure Cafe. Actually, up until its last day was last Wednesday, and that was really where I met so many friends that I know now who are out in, their bands or playing jam gigs, really doing their work out in the scene, right? Some, it ranges from everything from like the people who are hobbyists, right? And are just like there to play and have a great time. The people who are out there releasing some singles, doing some kind of DIY music, all the way to like, I have friends who are in bands that'll like regularly go and play places like DC9 or 930 Club or like Union Stage, Pearl Street Warehouse, right? Like just all of these fantastic people really brought in together, and I met them all through there. And that's where I really kind of learned that community of musicians. And, you get to build a whole one-on-one relationship with people, right? Like if I hadn't met some of these friends I know now, as friends from that setting, I probably would just be like some other random, like, oh, maybe I'll go see them live and like just kind of like fan over them and not really like know them. But having those creative spaces in the DC and Northern Virginia area, and even like Maryland as well, everything really just kind of helps people get together and socialize and get to know each other and really keep up with what everyone's doing. It's just a fantastic kind of community where everyone is just very supportive, right? That was a big quality of over at Epicure as well. Everyone, one of the biggest events, two of the biggest events actually, were they had rock jam nights on Mondays for about 5 years, maybe, I don't know. But because I was a newcomer in those for a while, and then they ended with COVID. But those were hosted by Kevin Pons, who really made sure he wanted to have like a scene of people who could just get together and play music and just play some jam band stuff, have a really fun time, and like have it quality, make sure it sounded good for everyone, and that everyone involved listening, playing, random walk-ins, just had a great time. And the other was also Epicure's open mic nights, and that went through a different variety of hosts for a long while. And it had a bit of a shift too. It was very funny seeing post-COVID, or at least like post, more vaccines and things coming out, it was kind of a resurgence in the type of crowd that was there. You got a lot of like high schoolers who just came out of the woodworks and like wanted to find somewhere they could go socialize at, right? And just enjoy music. A lot of punk kids, some of them in really killing bands that sounded great, right? And they'd go up and they'd play like 2 or 3 songs. And that had different hosts through it as well. I know someone who would help out as well was I think you spoke with him another week prior, Ricky Munoz with Moonlight Booking. He would bring people together and basically kind of just scout the different artists and people who were coming to the open mic night and get them all on shows together, essentially keeping that kind of community growth interlocked, where it's like, hey, now let's build this a step from, okay, we're going to an open mic and our band is going to play, and now turn it into, hey, we're playing some shows. We have a couple venues we can do some Saturdays or Fridays at, and really get these people more involved and more connected with trying to book things on their own, trying to figure out where they like to play, and really give that growth. And I think there aren't a lot of places like Epicure was that really help foster that whole scene, but definitely for this Northern Virginia and DC area, it was just a fantastic growth. And a lot of people, right, have taken that energy and really put it into their own endeavors after. I know a couple friends, they do an outdoor jam night party based off of what the Monday night jams were. They call it like 3407 Live, right? And it's just a great big backyard party, bonfire, everything, but the same idea. Jams to keep things happening, feeling good, feeling great. Everyone's having a good time and just there for music or to chill. And once again with Ricky, right, just getting these people who were from just open mic artists, maybe they're releasing some stuff, maybe they're having a good time, to really help introduce them into that world of, all right, I want to play a venue. Let's get a gig going. I need someone to book us, or maybe how would we book ourselves? Who do we know in the community? And really just fostering those connections. It's just fantastic. It's a wonderful scene, and it's a great time. I'm not going anywhere. If I was going anywhere, it would probably just be more into the city, honestly. Right. And I've had so many friends who try to give me that conversation like, oh no, man, come down to Richmond. Like the scene is so cool. Oh no, dude, like move up to Philly. The scene is so cool. And I'm like, I like it here though. This is fun. And especially not just with the bands, but also the work I can do as a sound engineer and the people I meet through that as well. And those endeavors, like it's pretty fun here. Like I'm having a good time. I don't know. I don't need to go anywhere else yet. Like we'll find out maybe in like 4 or 5 years. I don't know. But as far as I'm convinced, like this is kind of home.
All right. That's funny that you mentioned Nick Deshay because in high school, my friends and I were in, I don't know if you know Cappies, that program.
Yes. Yeah.
My friends and I were in that, and we would always make sure that we would see shows with him in it.
Yeah, I forgot. I like forget time to time that he was like a big theater kid, right?
Huge.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. He's what a wild spirit. Like we did. We did a gig with a friend down. She was doing pop music with some originals and some covers down in at Radford. He got a band together of us and we played down there. You know, we got a hotel for the night. It was a great time. And after the gig, gosh, we were just walking to a 7-Eleven. We were like, hey, that was really fun. Let's like maybe get some drinks. We still have another night we can stay. So now let's just like enjoy ourselves, get something simple from like the convenience store, right? And we'll just chill at the hotel. They had a pool table that the night before we stayed up till like 4 a.m. playing on. So now it was just pool, but kind of buzzed, and it was great. And as we're walking to the 7-Eleven, there's a crosswalk, not a stop sign or whatever, a crossing sign, because, you know, small town, whatever. It was right next to the campus. This family just like, you know, they stopped their car because we were approaching and they just waved to let us go. And it's like, oh, okay, thank you. And I wave back. And in my peripheral, I realize I see Nick just running forward in this crosswalk. And then as he's in front of their car, he just does a front flip in front of their car and just keeps going. And then I just kind of have to slowly walk past them like that just happened. And I was like, man, you didn't have to front flip on them, but you did. Because he just does that. He's just athletic. We did a gig at Fat Tuesdays. Ryan is hosting these Sunday kind of local music showcases out there at Fats in Fairfax. And was that 2 weeks ago or 3? Something recent. We played there and we were doing a cover of MGMT, right? Electric Feel. And not just that, I made the mistake of showing them also the Justice remix, which is an incredible remix. And they do a lot of like that slap-based chopping, this and that. And they were like, well, now that you showed us this, we have to work it in somewhere. And I was like, great, now I have to play really aggressive like slap chops as if I was a sampled instrument. Rad. And it went well. It was great. But because, you know, it was just an instrumental kind of like drums and bass part, we had this plan. And he did it in rehearsal too. And we were like, just don't hit anything. Don't fall on your stuff. Nick was like, all right, yeah, I'm going to, if I don't have space on stage during that part, I'm just going to go out front, go out in the like audience area, find a space. And I'm just going to do a backflip. And then I'm going to run back up and just keep singing the song. And that's what happened. And it was great because we were just playing. People were like, oh, what's happening? Why is he leaving? Backflip. And then just like roaring applause, right? It's like, what's up with that? And he's just like, all right, here we go. But yeah, just, oh, lovely energy. Much love to him.
Agree. So if you're just tuning in, this is Led into Gold. And if you would like to learn more about our guest, you can find him at massimozr.recording on social media. And we are going to currently talk about music industry news. So my industry news question is, our topic is about the Ed Sheeran songwriting case and how songs can sound so familiar. And I was wondering, since you were talking about how you could quickly identify these things now, do you ever do that? Like, you're like, oh, this song sounds like that song, it sounds like that song.
Oh, I mean, constantly. Mm-hmm. It's like, you get those people who are from the crowd, right? Where it's like, every note, every melody, every this and that has already been written, right? Yes. It's just, how are you using it? Like, it's 12 notes. Mm-hmm. That's all you get, right? So like, and you can change octaves and this and that, but that's what you got. So yeah, every pattern has been combined before, right? That's why you get into those, like, when it comes to music copyright, it's like, yeah, you can't copyright a chord progression because there's only so many that you can do that are like, especially like the popular ones that just inherently sound good, right? Like, what are you gonna do with that, right? You're not, someone's gonna be like, no, you copied my 4-chord progression that I did, like, but I copied that from this other band back in the 70s, like, right? And a lot of it just comes into that. A lot of it, you know, you do find some of that gritty world where people are trying to like take parts from songs without giving appropriate royalties and credits for what is essentially a sample or a rearrangement of something that has already been copywritten, right? Other times it's just an accident. Yeah. That's it. Like, you just think something sounds good. I go through that trend of, I like to listen to songs into the ground. So I get a lot of my music recommendations from friends. I will try listening to some new playlists, right? I'm an Apple Music guy, which is kind of a, ooh, right? I know. If only Spotify. I just don't like the color green. I don't know. That's really the one thing that keeps me from it. I'm like, I don't like this interface too much. Why is it so dark and green? What's going on here? But I'll try listening to things and I'll add things and then I'll just find like maybe a song or I'll get album recommendations from people because I don't really find a lot of new stuff that way. I'll just listen to the same groups over and over and over and just constantly. So then I'll find myself when it comes to songwriting or making parts or something that can be helpful, right? Because if you have a big repertoire of stuff you've listened to, you can say, okay, I want this bass line or this song to have this kind of vibe. And you can have something you can reference, see, well, what are they doing? Not obviously copying notes, but like, oh, this has this cool breakdown where it's like a 8th or 16th note pattern on the bass guitar, and the drums are only doing like a hi-hat snare thing, and then the guitar's got this droning note, right? Like different elements like that. Other times I've sat around and I've written a song and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is so cool. Like, I really like this idea. This is great, but it feels familiar and I don't know why. And then I'll go back and listen to something else. And I just like straight up copied the melody from something. And I'm like, oh, okay, so can't use this anymore. Like that, unless I really want to have my own copyright battle, 25 independent artists, sound engineer against huge label. Yeah, that's gonna go great. but it is always kind of just funny seeing that happen. I think it's just one of the little joys of music, right? Like you'll enjoy something, it'll get stuck in your head, or you'll hear things and you'll be like, ooh, this sounds like that. My favorite kind of use with that is it happened a bit in the mid 2010s with like a lot of the SoundCloud era stuff, but especially now with apps like TikTok, where it's like making a resurgence and that the music can be there because you're dancing to it, or it's part of a joke or something, or it's just some inane thing with some animation going on, right? You're finding these crazy mashups. It just, it harkens back to the what is it? This one's an old classic YouTube one. It was from Lazy Town. It was like the How to Bake a Cake song.
If you do the cooking by the book.
Yeah, if you do the cooking by the book, and then they mash it up with Lil Jon Get Low.
Yeah.
It's just like how you big and break it down. Like it's like you find those things just inanely out of nowhere. Or people will even do things further. I think there's some TikTok account called There I Ruined It, where it's just some guy with a DAW, right, that just goes through and will like do awful mashups of things. The most recent one I sent to my friends, which got a scathing review back of my friend Spencer saying, thanks, I hate it, ew, was he had done a video prior where it was Michael Jackson, oh gosh, which one was it? I think it was just Smooth Criminal, but only the sounds that aren't singing. So it's all of like the breath, like ooh, ow, ow, right? Like, and then he just did a follow-up where it's like all of the sounds from Smooth Criminal that aren't singing, but in raising intensity. So it starts with all the breaths, and then you just get like 3 like ow, like back to back, just getting slightly louder each time. And it's hilarious where you can just pick apart all these nuances with music, especially nowadays where, we have technology to kind of match like, ooh, these 2 songs could totally work. They could do a great mashup, right? Another case in point was there was that, I want to say Zed did it, but I'm not exactly sure. A DJ did this mashup of, I don't even know the original song. I'm that bad at this, but they did this. There was this like dance song that was out that was kind of like, like rock with it, and they mashed it up with the like from Squid Games, just like kind of before the breakdown and everything. And it's just great, right? Because like that, especially at the time when like that show was the biggest thing, right? And they were like, you know what? I can throw this in a set. I can do my own mashup of this because they sound similar enough, and it just works. And it's fantastic seeing how you can meld things together, right? Just seeing, oh, like what's going on here? These work really well, either because they sound similar or because they really don't, but they're at the same tempo, or they can be. So here we go. It's just fantastic to work with, and I love seeing a lot of the creativity that's just happening in the world with that.
Speaking of TikTok, so
Oh, good.
TikTok distribution. So do you think it's a good thing? And how long do you think they can pay artists 100% of what they earn on the platform?
I feel like they've got some leeway, right? I know there was that big void for a while where people's songs would just be used and they had no idea. And I still do think it is an inherent kind of, not like just strictly the platform problem, but also a bit of like a user base issue too, where it's, you can edit your videos beforehand, right? So if I just rip this song off my computer and I edit it all on my phone or something, and then I upload my video as my video, there is no algorithm that's going to catch, or I think sometimes it does, but it's not like super perfect. It's going to catch like, oh, your background music was this song, right? It's just going to say user audio, right? Like whatever that user's original audio was. But it's like, well, sure, they have talking or they have stuff going on, but no, this is a song. This one kept me awake for 3 hours actually trying to find it, because this was back when Willow Meet Me in Our Spot was going big, and I was hearing it on TikTok often. And for whatever reason, this trend like picked up where someone used like an original rip, but they didn't even, like that song is licensed. TikTok will license songs so that they can pay artists and that there is some kind of like royalty transaction within that. But this person had done a rip of it and uploaded it, and then people were just using that audio over and over, or just re-uploading their own rip of that audio. And it was driving me crazy because I couldn't figure out what the song was. And I felt really bad too, because it was already late at night and I didn't know the song. I didn't know the lyrics. I had no idea she was saying like caught a vibe, like, baby, are you coming for the ride? I was like, what is she saying? Like, I can't even Google the lyrics. What's happening? And it turns out, once I finally figured it out, I was like, no, the song is different though. What happened? They ripped it from like her and the other singer doing it on a live performance. And that was the version that was going around. And I was like, I spent like 2 or 3 hours, way too long, just trying to figure this out. And I was like, why couldn't someone just say the name of the song? Why don't people just go in the comments and say, oh, this is this song? Like, but technically the users don't have to. And especially in a case where, hey, that's not the kind of like waveform exact like licensed version that is in TikTok's algorithm and library, they're not going to find out, right? I almost wish, like, and I say this sparingly, because I know in terms of content creation in the modern era, everyone despises the YouTube algorithm, because it'll go through and find any audio clip, anything that's like 3 seconds long, and it'll be like, oh, right, here's a content strike because this is licensed audio you used. It can be like in the middle of like a 20-minute video, and they're just like, nope, copyright strike. I don't want something as mechanically violent as that, but I do think it would be handy if TikTok had something that could kind of sweep to that narrative, just to, because a lot of them, when it is a re-upload and it is using the waveform exact licensed version, it'll say, hey, this contains music from this song. And then you can go and search that song, especially for how a lot of audio I've seen, a lot of artists kind of do have blow ups because of TikTok. It would just be so handy to know what you're listening to at times. And I feel like that's kind of a platform issue, not like issue like they're not trying. They are trying to be responsible of how they do it, it seems, but just, you can't ever really control your user base. So you just have to try and be smarter than them in those regards.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone who has joined us so far for Alchemical Records' latest web series, Led into Gold, where our team is here with Massimo, Zaru, Roque. And there's so much work to be done in the creative community. So during this last segment, we'd like to explore how individuals can get involved with efforts like yours, Massimo, in the creative community, from seasoned members to newcomers to the scene. So my first question for you here is, now that you've begun to establish yourself more fully as part of the DMV music scene, how do you see yourself growing in the position or positions that you've made for yourself? And is there a possibility for people to get involved with what you do specifically?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I finally get to geek out about audio engineering. Here we go. Okay, so first off, musically, just buy an instrument, play it, suck at it for a while, and then you'll start sucking less and it'll feel super rewarding. Find friends who also maybe suck around the same level, make some stuff that sucks together, and then it'll like just keep snowballing, right? Like just get an instrument, have fun. It takes time. You can do it to whatever level you want, right? Like obviously I'm here and I'm like, oh, I'm the little music man, I gotta pay bills and stuff. Let's play really well, right? But people have jobs or people are students and you don't have that kind of time or even that kind of desire to really stake everything on this. That's rad. It's okay. Just do it because you love it, right? That's the easiest way to get involved on an instrument. Um, Sound engineering wise, all right. So I'm gonna say the like dirty little thing, which is the whole. Well, everyone knows it. You don't need to go to a school, right? You don't need to go to college for music to be able to do it at a professional level, right? There's so many resources and things you can learn, especially online, and also like YouTube is blown up with people doing tutorials. Like not even. I remember like freshman year, they would have some YouTube tutorials for like different things in Pro Tools, right? That you needed to you watch for a class or something because you could do that on your own time. It would save some class time. And those were some of the driest video essays I have ever seen. Like you just have a guy, you don't even see their face, and they're just like, well, hello there. Today we're looking at the cut and paste function in Pro Tools audio. And like and it's inane, and that's like 16 minutes long of just that. And like they go to silence you and you just hear like some like just from like the like mic feed, and it's like, oh, okay. Now there are people who do tutorials and they make them really fun, right? And they're actually engaging, and it's just really neat. Like that sphere of like creating content, like an entertainment content in that area has just kind of blown up. And also just the tools you need have become so much more affordable. DAWs are like, sometimes a heavy price point, but you can find the ones that work for you. You can find student versions that like you don't even need to be in a music program, right? You just need to be in school, and they're like, wow, you're a student, you might not have money. Here's a discount, right? There are even like DAWs you can get for your phone that are like $5, right? Or like even less. Sometimes they're free. I want to say, was it Steve Lacy who did that? He had done a whole EP with like just like a DAW on his phone. He basically produced it that way. I believe it was like something very like ground up, and it sounded incredible, right? There are all these options for doing it. I definitely fell into a bit of a niche where the privilege of being at a music school was that I had access to these musicians who were aiming for professional spaces, right? Especially a lot of classical musicians, because they always needed things recorded because they were doing auditions, they were doing recitals, they were just working on something that they wanted to look back on or send to friends and family, right? And it really got me into the niche like study I have where it's my entire rig is mobile, and I have a heavy old mic bag. I have a really heavy stand bag, right? My interface is at least in the little suitcase thing on wheels, so I can just roll that behind me while the rest of my body is in pain. But working with these students and through them getting access to recording their recitals in these spaces over at Mason, like Harris Theater, Center for the Arts, different ensemble rooms or classrooms or practice rooms even, really helped kind of let me specialize in that non-traditional type of recording where this is live. It's in a space. You're not multi-tracking, nothing's isolated. You're not going to go back and edit anything. These people don't even want you doing that. The most you're going to do is some specialized EQing. Maybe if the room has a weird sound to it, right? Getting it to sound back to how it naturally did in the space that maybe the mics didn't quite recapture. Learning how to deal with things like if there's any phase cancellation if like the microphones weren't measured, if you didn't have time for that, right? Or if there was a weird like placement that's like interacting, then okay, how do we solve this? Because it's not like we can go back and fix it, right? Like, what is our solution here? That kind of access was just incredible. And it's really just knowing the people, and it's just experimenting. I didn't even start doing it as a business for like my first 8 or 10 recordings. It was really just me asking friends, hey, you're doing a recital, like, and I think it's a non-degree recital, so it's less, I don't want to say less important, but it's not something they're doing for like a jury or for a grade, right? So I would ask, hey, can I just set up microphones and sit to the side and try and record it? And they'd be like, oh, okay, sure. And then that just kind of caught wind. And that definitely, that access to community is always going to be the biggest part. If you don't know where to find that community, you know, find people who are in your area, you know, have that talk with them and say, hey, I want to experiment just like while you're doing something else, right? So like, I'm not being intrusive to what you're doing. I'm just going to set up, like, see if what I do works or doesn't. Even better, and this is my favorite part, I have textbooks. So these are big, right? This first one is kind of dry. I do not recommend a full read through. I don't know if the capture is going to have that reversed or not, like it is on the camera. But anyways, it's this one's the 8th edition, Modern Recording Techniques by David Miles Huber and Robert E. Runstein. Yeah. In one of my topics classes for advanced audio recording, they had us get this textbook. It is, let's just look, like 600 pages, right? And you don't need to go through all of it, but it's always good to have these big comprehensive resources you can look back on maybe when you're looking for inspiration or trying to have a question about something. Like, just from even skimming the table of contents, this thing walks you through literally hearing and the different parts of waveforms and characteristics, all the way to acoustics, all the way to, it gives you different examples of microphones and what their application is. It gives you the different recording methods that studios have used. It shows you some intros to DAWs and, you know, how MIDI works, like different MIDI clocks, how amplification works. Just a huge resource where it's like everything you could think of, oh, I don't quite know where that is, it's in here. Like, you don't have to read the whole thing. Don't do that. I think I would cry if I had to. But it's incredible having those resources. Now, the one that I did read through, and I can just show it because I don't know if it comes with a cover or not. I think they have an updated version. This is called, and this is like my audio Bible. This I read while working in the music office over summer. It's an academic office in the summer. Nothing was happening. I was there for like 5 hours a day, bored to tears. But I figured out, my professor in one of the first level classes had us do a reading that he had photocopied in from this book. And I said, hey, you know, that explained things really well. What was that book? And he showed it to me. I think that's from like the 70s or 80s. It's what his professor had, like him reading back when he was a student in undergrad. And it is just fantastic. And its age is actually something that works in its advantage. It's called The Acoustical Foundations of Music. It is by John Bacchus. And this thing was an eye-opening, I read it front to back. Well, almost front to back, right? But it's an eye-opening like experience of just learning sound, right? Because it's old. There is no like digital processing. There is no this and that. But what it talks to is just the foundation of how sound exists itself. This was the most helpful thing, especially when I was trying to approach recording sound in a space, right? It's literally broken up into 4 parts. The first part, which is the part I skipped because I was like, I don't know, I did that in high school, is literally, just in case you don't even know what a wave is, it is a full physics lesson of, here's a wave, here's how sound is sound, molecules of air hit things, right? So hey, that can be useful. Then the second section is literally how we hear and starting to get into some of those musical qualities, right? So it's like, look, air moves, now your ear moves, right? different speeds. That's what we call like a frequency, right? There can be different like tone qualities. It goes into timbre and like temperament and scales and why certain things work together. It goes into like fundamentals, fundamental pitches and their harmonics, right? And why this physically exists and sounds good. And that's just applicable to everything, especially even just sound design, right? Learning what combines into these sounds. Why do these things sound this way? The third section, which is the shortest one, it's just, acoustics in an auditorium, basically like Reverb 101. You're in a big space. Someone makes a sound, it bounces around the walls. You hear it a little delayed. That's why it's echoey. And then the last section, which was just the easiest eye opener for me, it goes through most all instrument families and talks about how their sound is produced and where it comes from and why, which is an eye opener for if you're thinking, okay, I want to record someone playing violin, but I don't quite know where I'd need to put the mic. This goes through it. Hey, the big thing vibrating, like sure, the body is helping it amplify, but the big vibrations are coming from the bridge. Boom, right? Or it goes into like woodwind instruments. It's like, okay, you're in a live setting, you've seen a sax player put the microphone right on the bell inwards, right? Sure, that works because you don't want to get any other sound from other instruments happening, but the actual best way of recording a saxophone is pointing at the middle of it straight at the body, because the sound is going to be produced loudest from whatever the lowest open hole is, or I guess the highest open hole, right? So if they everything clamped down, then it's going to be coming from lower on their body. But if they're just holding something up here, it's coming from up here. That's essentially just how, pipes that make sound work, right? And this goes into that. And it's just an incredible read. It goes through all those, and it even goes through kind of how speakers work a bit too. So you can even look at that like, hey, how would I maybe put a microphone in front of a guitar amp? That's just a speaker making one sound. But it's just fantastic read. I love it. I cannot recommend it more to anyone who wants to get into recording, wants to learn about how sound is made, right? And really kind of delve into like, what would my approaches be, right? And it you can just buy it, right? You can just find it online. You can just find these resources, read some reviews, read some other reviews of other books, and really get this wealth of knowledge that you can then go and experiment with, right? Like, you don't even need to start with anything crazy. Start with like one microphone, right? And maybe an interface for that like goes to your phone, or if you do have a DAW or something, like something for your computer, and just experiment, right? It's especially helpful if you play an instrument yourself, or if you have a friend who now you can be intrusive and maybe take some of their time, put it around different areas, right? Plan on, okay, this will sound like this because I read it, and then hear what that sounds like, and then try to imagine, well, if I put this microphone over here, though, what do I think will be different, right? And get some of that kind of creative thinking into it, and then record it, and then listen back. And hey, were you right? Were you not? What did you learn, right? Like that, just informing yourself with all of this. It's really just, I don't know. I'm gushing now. It's just fun, right? And there's so many ways for people to get involved. It's just fantastic, especially with the accessibility it has today.
Thank you so much. I had come up on the Yamaha sound book, or sound reinforcement handbook. So I'm definitely looking forward to checking out Acoustical Foundations. My dad had a book from his communications class, which taught engineering. So he still has his original engineering book. And that still like has a way of explaining things that gets convoluted, I think, today. Like there's so much information. There's like some basic principles that that old books are able to teach us.
Yeah, and that really is just the difference between those two textbooks, right? Like one is a huge modern, hey, here's everything, including DAWs, including like digital setups, all this and that, like audio networking, all of that, right? Great reference, right? But Acoustical Foundations, front to back read, unless you already know physics and what sound is. So maybe 2/3 read, right? But it's something that you can actually digest and just gives you, it's not overwhelming. It's just actual helpful tools.
That's great. Looking forward to reading it. Thanks for the recommendation. Let Into Gold features music industry professionals who are making an impact in both local and international creative industries. Really enjoyed our time with Massimo today. Massimo Zaru Roque during today's episode, sponsored by Alchemical Records. Please be sure to visit us on our website, alchemicalrecords.com, for the latest music news and happenings. You can also find us on your favorite social media platform at Alchemical Records, except for Twitter, which is just Chemical Records. Do connect with our guest at massimorecording.com and massimozr.recording on social media, on Instagram specifically. Do you have any final words for us before we close out? Any words for our viewers?
Oh, man. I've talked so much already. I don't know. Just make music. I don't know. Get out there. Just do it. Right? That's it. It's fun. Right? You want to record stuff? Do it. I don't know. You want to do sound? Find like you go to church or something, find out if they have a soundboard. Be like, hey, can I learn some of this? I don't know. Right? Like find a community space, find anything, right? You can get involved. And once again, like it's no pressure. You can get and do as much or as little as you feel like, because the whole point is just have the joy in it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.